It happened on a Sunday. The kind of Sunday where everything feels a little slower, like the world is taking a breath before the chaos of Monday. My name's Luke. I'm 38, divorced, and a single dad to a quiet, bookish 10-year-old boy named Caleb who, until that afternoon, still thought the world was mostly fair. I wasn't supposed to be at that lunch. My brother, Gavin, had invited everyone to this upscale waterfront restaurant to celebrate his promotion. He's a corporate attorney who never lets anyone forget it. His wife, Naomi, is the kind of person who thinks passive aggression counts as charm, and that sarcasm directed at children is a form of comedy. Caleb and I had originally planned to spend the day at the Science Museum, his choice, but my mother called last minute and said, "It would mean a lot to your brother if you showed up, just for dessert. You don't want to be the one who skips, do you?" I didn't respond right away, and she added, "He's still your family, Luke." So I caved, threw on a collared shirt, helped Caleb button his, and drove 45 minutes out to the coast. The restaurant was one of those places that didn't have a kids menu, the type where waiters wear gloves and talk like they're narrating a wine documentary. By the time we arrived, the long white linen table was already half covered in half-finished appetizers, and the air smelled like garlic butter and money. Gavin was laughing too loud. Naomi had her sunglasses propped on top of her head like a crown, and their twin boys were sword fighting with crab legs. My sister, Jenna, sat at the far end looking bored, and my dad was scrolling through his phone like he didn't know anyone here. I nodded to Gavin, gave Naomi a polite smile, and helped Caleb into the seat at the corner of the table, the only spot left, the one that somehow didn't have a plate or silverware. "Hey, you made it," Gavin said, as if I'd just returned from a war, not a museum detour. "Didn't think you'd show," Mom asked. I said simply, sitting down. Naomi didn't look up. "We didn't know if you guys were coming, so we didn't order for you." That was the first twinge. Caleb glanced at me, confused. The table was full of clinking glasses and noisy chewing. No one even made room. A waiter appeared, a tall guy in his 20s with slicked back hair and a too-tight vest. He smiled at me like he was trained to. "Can I bring you a menu, sir?" "Just one," Naomi said, not even looking at him. "The kid already ate, right?" Then she laughed, more to herself than anyone else. "I mean, he's used to going without." That sentence, that throwaway joke, it landed like a brick wrapped in silk. I looked at Caleb. His face didn't fall. It didn't do anything. He just looked down at the table and started picking at a crumb like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "I'll take a menu," I said. Calm, steady, like I didn't just hear someone casually humiliate my kid. The waiter hesitated. "For the child as well?" I didn't answer right away. I waited, slow and deliberate, then said, "Bring him what I usually order at the Four Seasons." The words weren't loud, but they didn't have to be. They dropped like a stone into still water, sending ripples across the table. Conversations paused. Forks hovered midair. Gavin raised an eyebrow. Naomi finally looked at me, her lips parting slightly in a half-smirk that didn't know whether to retreat or reload. I didn't clarify. I just stared down at my water glass and gave Caleb a wink he didn't quite understand yet. Now, before I go further, let me explain something about our family dynamic. I wasn't always the outsider. Growing up, I was the older brother who looked out for Gavin. I helped him with math homework, gave him my hand-me-downs, took the blame when he broke Dad's old radio. But somewhere along the line, maybe in college, maybe when I turned down the law school route and started my own tech consulting firm, something shifted. Gavin became the golden boy. I became the guy who chose the hard way. That's how Mom phrased it once. "You've always made things harder for yourself, Luke." Thing is, I did fine. More than fine. I just didn't advertise it. I didn't roll up in Teslas or post about my quarterly earnings on Facebook. I worked hard, saved smarter, and put Caleb before everything. I wasn't rich by their standards, but I wasn't struggling either. Still, because I didn't flaunt it, they assumed I was barely getting by. And honestly, I let them think that. It was easier than correcting every offhand comment. Until that lunch. After my comment, the air changed. Naomi shifted in her seat. One of the twins dropped a fork. Gavin cleared his throat and tried to move things along, asking my dad about his golf handicap, like the moment hadn't just cracked something in half. I played along. I let them sit in it, uncomfortably, for a while. The waiter returned with 2 menus and a fresh set of silverware. He handed one to Caleb with a genuine smile and said, "Chef's specials are on the back, young man." Naomi muttered. He probably can't even pronounce half of it, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. I glanced at my son, who was now scanning the menu like it was a textbook. "You want to share a steak?" I asked. He nodded. "With the sauce thing you like." "Béarnaise," I said. "Good choice." Gavin watched all this with a furrowed brow. I could almost hear the gears turning. He wasn't used to being the second most confident man at the table. "I didn't know you were a Four Seasons kind of guy," he said lightly, eyes still on his wine glass. "I'm a lot of things you don't know," I said, not unkindly. He laughed, but it sounded more like a cough. "Well, must be nice. You've always had a taste for flair." That was Gavin's way of trying to put me back in a box. The artsy one. The impulsive one. The one who made things harder for himself. I leaned forward just a little. "You know what's nice? Not having to explain myself." That silenced him for a moment. The waiter returned again, this time with bread and olive tapenade. He placed it neatly between Caleb and me. Naomi raised her eyebrows as if to say, "We already had that." But she said nothing. My mother finally spoke up from her end of the table, voice sharp and artificial. "Let's not make this about money. Gavin worked very hard for this promotion." I nodded. "He did. And it's a great restaurant. Just wish everyone felt equally welcome." That line. That was the real beginning. The thing that poked the hive. Gavin didn't like being questioned. Naomi didn't like being checked. And my mother? She didn't like me making things awkward. But the truth is, things had been awkward for years. I just stopped hiding it. That lunch wasn't the start of our family's unraveling, but it was the first time I stopped pulling on the thread. And the thread had a lot left to unravel. I wish I could say that one awkward lunch was the end of it, that we ate, exchanged fake smiles, and all went home. But things with my family don't just stop. They fester. They dig in deep. And after that day, the resentment that had been simmering just below the surface started to boil. Caleb and I finished our steak. The waiter treated him with more respect than half our family did, walking him through the sauces and explaining each dish like he was royalty. Caleb didn't say much, but he smiled. That was enough for me. When the check came, Gavin snatched it like it was a trophy. "I've got this," he said, waving it like a flag. I nodded. "Thanks. I'll get the next one." Naomi laughed. "There's a next one?" It was meant as a joke, but not the funny kind. The kind meant to draw blood. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, then at Gavin. Neither could hold my stare for long. Caleb and I left shortly after. As we walked through the parking lot, he tugged my sleeve. "Why doesn't Aunt Naomi like us?" he asked, eyes too serious for his age. I knelt next to him, hand on his shoulder. "Some people only like others when they feel better than them. But you? You're not less, Caleb. You're just quieter, smarter, kinder. And not everyone knows how to handle that." He didn't say anything else. He just nodded and held my hand a little tighter. The next few weeks were quiet, on the surface. Family group chats were their usual self-congratulatory mess, filled with vacation photos, party invites, and jokes that somehow always had me or Caleb as the punchline. I started noticing patterns. Jenna's birthday got a full dinner. My dad's golf one got a brunch. Gavin's boys got constant praise for existing. Caleb? His perfect report card got a thumbs-up emoji from mom and nothing else. I didn't push it. I had a business to run, clients to manage, bills to pay, Caleb's school events to attend. But the bitterness grew. Not because I needed their praise, I'd long since outgrown that, but because Caleb was starting to notice. And worse, he was starting to internalize it. Then came the family weekend trip. Naomi sent the invite like she was planning a royal coronation. "Hey everyone. Gavin booked a beautiful cabin in the mountains, 8 bedrooms, full kitchen, hot tub, the works. It's the perfect spot for a fall getaway. Kids can do a scavenger hunt. Adults can drink wine by the fire. Let's make some memories." The invite went out to everyone. Gavin, Naomi, their twins, my parents, Jenna and her fiancé, even my uncle and his new girlfriend. Caleb and I were, of course, included on paper. I texted Naomi privately. "Do you want us to bring anything? Snacks? Groceries?" She responded. "Oh, I think we're good. Just bring clothes and maybe some books for Caleb. He's not the outdoorsy type, right?" Again, I didn't bite. We arrived Friday evening. The cabin was stunning, no lie. Vaulted ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the pine forest, leather couches, everything decorated in warm autumn tones. The kitchen was fully stocked, except for the fridge labeled Kids Snacks, which had juice boxes, string cheese, and small containers labeled for Grant and Carter only. That would be Naomi's twins. Caleb opened the fridge, looked at the labels, then closed it without a word. I caught Naomi watching from across the room. Should we label our own stuff? I asked lightly. She waved a hand. Oh no, we just didn't want the twins fighting over things. I'm sure Caleb's fine with whatever's in the pantry. The pantry had 2 cans of lentils and an expired box of rice cakes. Dinner that night was a grilled seafood spread, salmon, scallops, and lobster tails. Gavin had apparently brought a private cooler of high-end groceries and was now acting like he'd hunted the fish himself. Hope everyone's hungry, he announced, passing out plates. Caleb sat next to me, quiet as usual. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to make him feel like a burden. So I just smiled and leaned over. We'll eat after, I whispered. Let them do their thing. But as the plates made their way around, Naomi made her move. When she got to Caleb, she paused theatrically. Oh shoot, I forgot to ask, does Caleb eat seafood? He does, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Well, all this is kind of portioned for the twins and the adults. Maybe he can have a bit of Gavin's. Gavin glanced over, shrugged like it wasn't his problem. Before I could answer, Naomi added, casually, like she was sharing a recipe, he'll be fine. He's used to going without, right? Laughter. Not from everyone. But enough. Something snapped. I looked at Caleb. He didn't react. That was worse. I'll be back in 30, I said, standing up. I drove down the mountain into the nearest town. Found the nicest steakhouse in the area. Ordered takeout, 2 filet mignons, mashed potatoes, asparagus, and cheesecake for dessert. It cost more than I care to admit. Worth every cent. When I walked back into the cabin with the warm bag, Naomi's nose wrinkled like I'd brought roadkill. What's that smell? Dinner, I said. For my son. Gavin raised an eyebrow. You didn't have to do that. I know. I plated it carefully for Caleb. Sat with him while he ate. Everyone else watched, but said nothing. But something changed after that. Subtle at first. The jokes got sharper. More sideways glances. Whispers when I left the room. The twins started mocking Caleb openly. His clothes, his books, his voice. At one point, I found one of them tossing Caleb's sketchpad around like a frisbee. Where'd you get this? A thrift store? One twin sneered. Caleb didn't respond. He just reached out, calmly, and took it back. I told Gavin. He laughed. They're just playing. Boys will be boys. And Naomi? She smiled and said, maybe if he stood up for himself, they wouldn't bother him so much. I wanted to leave then. I almost did. But Caleb begged me not to. Can we just stay until Sunday? I want to finish the puzzle we started. That night, I found him curled up in bed, holding the sketchpad like it was armor. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. But something in his eyes looked dimmer. The next day was the final straw. They announced a scavenger hunt for the kids. Caleb was excited. Finally something he could do. He grabbed a pencil and was halfway out the door when Naomi stopped him. Oh, actually, we already started. The twins, Grace and Leo, are on teams. It'll be confusing with odd numbers. Caleb looked up at her, blinking. Can't I just go alone? She smiled. That wouldn't be fair. They already have head starts. Maybe next time. I stepped in. Let him go. He doesn't need to win. He just wants to participate. She shrugged. House rules. Caleb turned around without a word. Went to the back deck and sat alone, watching the trees sway in the wind. That's when I walked over to Gavin. We're leaving. He looked up from his beer. You're overreacting. No, I said, voice low. You've mistaken our quiet for weakness. I let things slide. A lot. But that ends now. He smirked, like I was bluffing. So what? You're going to throw a tantrum and storm off? I stared at him for a long second, then said, no, I'm going to make sure you never forget this weekend. And I meant it. I didn't tell Caleb my plan. I just packed our bags, loaded the car, and told him we were heading home early. What Gavin didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been keeping a quiet record for years. Every slight, every backhanded comment, every fake smile, every text, every forgotten birthday, every time Caleb was excluded, ignored, or made the punchline of someone else's joke. I had receipts. Literal ones. And that wasn't all. Because remember that Four Seasons comment? That wasn't a bluff. And soon, they were going to learn just how big of a mistake it was to assume I was still the struggling brother who chose the hard way. Because something else happened first. Something none of them saw coming. Something that shattered the last illusion I had that maybe, this family just didn't know any better. It happened the morning after we left. We left before sunrise. The cabin was still and cold, the scent of last night's fire lingering faintly in the air. I packed in silence while Caleb brushed his teeth, bleary-eyed but obedient. He didn't ask why we were leaving so early. He just zipped up his hoodie, hugged his sketchpad to his chest, and climbed into the car without a word. The ride down the mountain was quiet, except for the steady hum of tires and the occasional sniffle from the back seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror a few times. He wasn't crying. He just looked numb. Halfway down the slope, as the morning sun started to spill through the pines, he finally spoke. Did I do something wrong? That question, that tiny, broken voice. It wrecked me. I pulled over, shifted into park, sat there gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to figure out what to say that wouldn't make it worse. No, I said eventually. You did everything right. They're the ones who got it wrong. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Not completely. That seed of doubt had already been planted, and I knew how long those roots could grow if you let them. The next few months were hard. Not for financial reasons. Not even professionally. My consulting firm was doing well. Very well, actually. The previous year, I'd landed a long-term contract with a Fortune 100 company that quietly tripled my income, but I kept my lifestyle the same. No luxury cars. No designer brands. I'd learned long ago that silence buys peace. And when you grow up in a family that weaponizes comparison, staying under the radar becomes second nature. No, the hard part wasn't money. It was watching Caleb retreat. The bright-eyed, curious boy who once rattled off facts about outer space and drew fantasy maps on napkins started shrinking into himself. He became quieter at school. His grades slipped. Not drastically, but enough that his teachers noticed. He didn't want to sign up for the science fair. He started asking if he could just stay home during playdates or birthday parties. I tried everything. Therapy, weekend trips, cooking his favorite meals, reading together at night. But something had shifted. He'd seen a side of the world that kids shouldn't have to process. That feeling of being unwanted, not because of who you are, but because of who you're not. I felt like I had failed him. And worse, I felt alone. You'd think having money would make things easier. But I wasn't a billionaire. I was just a guy who built a business from scratch, hit a few lucky breaks, and made smart investments. I didn't have some vast support system. My friends were mostly colleagues. My social life existed in group chats and the occasional networking event. Family. That word felt like a bruise now. Still, I kept moving. I doubled down on my work, not because I wanted to escape, but because I needed to build. I needed to create something better, not just for me, but for Caleb. I poured hours into refining my systems, automating processes, and expanding into new niches. I rebranded my consulting firm into something sleeker, more public-facing. Took on a few speaking gigs. Quietly got featured in a small business magazine under a pseudonym I'd used for years, Yell Rowan. My initials. My mother never caught it. She probably thought it was someone else entirely. And slowly, things started to shift. Not overnight, but piece by piece. Caleb began to draw again. He started with small sketches, dragons, wizards, maps, then entire storyboards. He showed me one called The Boy Who Made His Own Kingdom. It was about a kid who built a castle in the clouds after being cast out of a village. When I asked what happened to the villagers at the end, he shrugged. They all wanted to come to the castle, but he just flew higher. I didn't cry, but I stared at that sketch for a long time after he went to bed. Meanwhile, the rest of the family moved on like nothing had happened. They posted endless family photos from the cabin weekend. Naomi's captions were insufferable. Grateful for family, fresh air, and togetherness. One photo showed Gavin and his boys posing in front of a pine tree Caleb had helped decorate the day before we left. No credit. No mention. Just erased. My mother called occasionally, usually to remind me of some birthday or event. Never to ask about Caleb. Never to apologize. Then came the real gut punch. It was a Tuesday. I was on a Zoom call with a client when I got a text from Jenna. Did you see what Mom posted? I didn't reply. Opened Facebook. It was a collage of our beautiful grandchildren, complete with sparkling overlays and glitter fonts. Gavin's twins. Jenna's stepson. Even a blurry baby photo from our uncle's girlfriend's niece. No Caleb, not even in the background. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, breath stuck in my chest. Underneath, someone had commented, "Don't you have another grandson?" My mother replied, "Luke's son? He's very quiet. Doesn't come around much. A bit different. Still love him, of course. Still love him. Of course." I didn't know if I was more furious or just numb. I copied the screenshot, saved it in a folder I'd started keeping. It was called, "For the Record." I didn't reply to Jenna. I didn't text my mom. I didn't post anything in response. But something inside me clicked into place. That was the last time they would make Caleb feel invisible. That night, after tucking Caleb into bed, I pulled out an old notebook. One I used to use when I first started freelancing. I flipped to a blank page and wrote 3 words in big, capital letters across the top. "Make them remember." And I started planning. Not revenge in the dramatic sense. No shouting matches. No gotcha moments. Just something smarter. Something long-term. Something irrefutable. I began by making a list of every time Caleb had been mistreated, excluded, or undermined. Just facts. Cold, hard facts. I noted the cabin weekend, the dinner snub, the scavenger hunt incident, the Facebook post. I gathered screenshots, video clips, calendar dates, email threads. Then I made a second list of people, allies, friends, clients who respected me, mentors, teachers who admired Caleb, anyone who'd ever seen us as we truly were. And finally, I made a third list. Opportunities. See, when you're underestimated, you have the gift of being ignored. And when people stop looking, you can build whatever you want. I already had a strong consulting business, but I decided to quietly launch something new, an online platform for young artists and writers. A space where kids like Caleb could create, collaborate, and be seen. I named it CloudKeep. I didn't tell the family. Didn't post about it. Didn't brag. But within 6 months, CloudKeep had over 12,000 users, a glowing review from an educational blog, and a grant from a tech incubator that doubled its reach. Caleb didn't just help design the logo, he named it. And on the About page, under Inspiration, I wrote, "For the kid who was told he didn't belong. We built this so you'll never have to hear that again." One night, while he was working on a new comic strip, I showed him the site. His eyes lit up. "This is real." "It's yours too," I said. He just nodded, then said quietly, "Can I post my map?" "You can post anything." That was the first time in months I saw him grin. But even as our lives flourished behind the scenes, the family didn't change. If anything, they doubled down. They planned a massive Thanksgiving party, sent invitations weeks in advance. Everyone was tagged in the family group chat. Except me. No "Hey, are you coming?" No RSVP. Just silence. When Jenna called, she sounded awkward. "I thought you were coming." "I wasn't invited." She paused. "They probably just forgot." They always do. Another pause. "Luke, you could still show up." I could have. I didn't. Instead, I took Caleb on a trip. Just the two of us. Rented a cabin near a frozen lake. We cooked together, made snowmen, and read books by the fire. No judgment. No cold shoulders. No labeled fridges. Just us. I posted one photo. Caleb holding a mug of hot cocoa, cheeks red from the cold, a grin on his face. Caption: "Turns out, family doesn't need to be complicated." 3 hours later, my mom called. I let it ring. I knew what was coming. The slow realization. The shift in dynamic. The one where they finally noticed that I was no longer playing their game. But the real turning point? That came a few weeks later. It involved a wedding, a dress code, a microphone, and a speech none of them saw coming. They say weddings bring people together. But in my family, they're more like battlegrounds dressed in pastel linens. Jenna was getting married. My younger sister, the one person in our family who occasionally showed a flicker of humanity, had met a decent guy named Tom. He was kind, awkward in a charming way, and, most importantly, he treated Jenna like a human being instead of a project. When she announced their engagement, I sent her a genuine congratulations and a gift card to a local spa. She thanked me immediately. It was one of the few interactions that didn't leave me feeling like I needed a shower afterward. The wedding was scheduled for late spring at some high-end winery estate about 2 hours away. Formal attire. Outdoor ceremony. 3-day weekend event. I was happy for her. Genuinely. But I also knew what this meant. Another round of subtle humiliation from Naomi, Gavin, and my mother. Another opportunity for them to parade their social standing and remind me and my son exactly where we stood on their imagined family ladder. I wasn't going to take it this time. This wasn't going to be a reaction. This was going to be a plan. The final arc of a long game I'd been playing for years without realizing it. The first seed was planted when I got the wedding invitation. It came in a thick cream envelope, gilded at the edges, with cursive script announcing the union of Jenna and Tom. I opened it slowly at the kitchen counter, Caleb eating cereal behind me. The invite listed the weekend itinerary: welcome dinner on Friday, ceremony on Saturday, farewell brunch on Sunday. No mention of roles. No flower girl. No ring bearer. No family speeches. I flipped the card over, expecting to see some kind of "we'd love for you to say a few words" note, especially since I was Jenna's only sibling. Nothing. Fine. I scanned the guest list. Gavin's twins were listed for the ceremony and the dinner. Even their names were printed in a decorative font under the heading Junior Wedding Party. Naomi, of course, was listed as part of the inner circle. My mother was in charge of the seating chart. Of course she was. I texted Jenna. Looks beautiful. Quick question. Was Caleb supposed to be in the ceremony? She replied a few hours later. I wanted him to be. I suggested he do a reading or be ring bearer. But Mom said it might be confusing with the twins already in the lineup. Confusing? She said it'd look unbalanced. Like he was an add-on. I didn't respond. An add-on? That word stuck in my head like a splinter. Later that evening, I pulled out the notebook again. The one with the header, "Make them remember." I flipped past the timelines and incident logs, past the screenshots and calendar notes. This wasn't about documenting anymore. It was time to act. I started with the guest list. You see, weddings, especially expensive winery weddings, require logistics. RSVPs, seating arrangements, meal selections, gifts, and most importantly, donors. Gavin had apparently contributed a generous amount to the wedding fund. Naomi was bragging about it in her book club. My mother had offered to handle all the little things, meaning she'd inserted herself into every decision from the flower arrangements to the playlist. But Jenna? She'd paid for most of it herself. She mentioned in passing, during one of our rare one-on-one calls, that she and Tom had taken out a personal loan to cover the balance. It's worth it, she said. I just want everyone to feel included. I didn't say what I was thinking, because everyone didn't include Caleb. Or me. So I called a friend. Actually, a former client turned friend, Sabrina, a successful wedding planner who owed me a favor after I rebuilt her online booking system for free during COVID. She knew everyone in the local event industry. You got any dirt on the Ridgeview Estate Winery? I asked. She laughed. What kind of dirt are we talking? Vendor issues. Ownership changes. Tax records. Anything. 2 days later, she called me back. So, interesting timing, she said. Ridgeview recently got acquired by a holding company based in Dallas. Very private, very low-key. But I dug a little. Want to guess who owns a 26% share? I blinked. Who? You do. Turns out, one of my angel investments from 3 years ago, back when I was still experimenting with venture funds, had purchased a minority stake in a hospitality group that had just finalized its acquisition of Ridgeview. And thanks to a clause buried in the deal, all shareholders above 20% had access to event policy decisions, usage audits, and special override privileges. I nearly dropped my phone. Can I get access to the guest list? I asked. She paused. You sure you want to go that route? I'm not going to ruin anything, I said. Just adjust the balance. That same night, I emailed Ridgeview's event manager under my corporate account and requested access to the wedding logistics under shareholder rights. Within 24 hours, I had everything. RSVPs, meal selections, seating charts, even the playlist. I stared at it for a long time. Caleb and I were seated at table 12, the furthest table from the ceremony space, next to 2 distant cousins and an old teacher Jenna hadn't seen since grade school. Gavin and Naomi were at table 1, of course, right next to the couple. My mom was giving a toast. Gavin's twins were doing the flower toss and ring delivery. There was no mention of Caleb anywhere else. They didn't forget him. They just excluded him. Deliberately. And they were about to regret it. I didn't change anything. Not yet. First, I needed to be strategic. I reached out to Jenna directly. Need any help with the tech side of the wedding? Live stream? Audio recordings? She replied instantly. Yes. Tom's cousin was going to do it, but dropped out. You'd be saving us. Perfect. I arranged a private AV crew. My crew. People I trusted. They'd handle the stream, the mics, the backup recordings, and I'd get every second of footage. Not to manipulate, not to twist, just to own the narrative for once. Next, I called in another favor, this time from Marcus, an art director I'd met at a local design conference. He was flashy, brilliant, and owed me for hooking him up with a big-name client last year. You said you'd design anything for me, no questions asked. I did. I want a custom tux for my son. High quality, elegant, fit for the cover of GQ Kids. He laughed. What's the occasion? Redemption. Caleb's tux arrived a week before the wedding. Navy blue with black satin lapels, custom embroidery of his initials, and a pocket square that matched mine. When I showed it to him, he froze. This is for me. Only the best, I said. His voice was quiet. But I'm not in the wedding. You don't have to be in it, I said. You just have to walk through it like you belong. Meanwhile, I had my assistant, Mel, the kind of person who could find a birth certificate in under 5 minutes, draft up a few anonymous submissions to wedding blogs highlighting Cloud Keep, citing Caleb's comic series, and how it was gaining traction. We didn't name names, but the story was catchy. Young boy uses art to cope with rejection, ends up building an empire with his dad. It got picked up. A minor tech outlet reposted it. Then a parenting blog. Then, bizarrely, a celebrity chef quote tweeted it saying, "This kid is going places." Naomi shared it on her Instagram story, clearly without realizing who it was. This is adorable. Kids like this give me hope. I nearly choked on my coffee. I didn't correct her. Yet. Because this story wasn't done. I had one more piece to put in place. At the Friday welcome dinner, I planned to keep quiet. Observe. Smile. Let them believe they'd won. Let them overlook me and Caleb, just like always. But on Saturday, when the mics were live and the guests were gathered and my mother stood there beaming in her sequin dress, I had a little speech of my own to give. Not spiteful, not cruel, just the truth. And maybe, just maybe, when it was over, they'd finally understand who Caleb was and who I had become. And neither of us would ever be invisible again. The welcome dinner was exactly what I expected. Carefully staged, dripping with artificial warmth, and designed to make Naomi and Gavin look like royalty. The patio twinkled with fairy lights. A string quartet played something soft in the background. The wine flowed freely, as did the compliments, mostly in Gavin's direction. "Oh, the boys are just so well-mannered, Naomi. You're doing an amazing job. They must be so excited for tomorrow. Ring bearer and flower toss." Naomi beamed, eating up every word. And there was Caleb, sitting quietly at table 7, drawing on the back of a dessert menu with a crayon the waiter had reluctantly found. He didn't complain. He never did. But I watched him out of the corner of my eye, and I saw it. The same tiny, dull flicker I'd seen after the cabin weekend. That flicker of not belonging. And I knew, right then, that tomorrow had to count. The morning of the wedding, Ridgeview was drenched in golden light. Rows of white chairs stretched across a trimmed lawn that overlooked the vineyard. A floral archway framed the altar. The sun hung low and gentle, casting a warm hue across the estate. It was beautiful. Honestly, I arrived with Caleb early, dressed to the nines. He wore the custom tux, hair brushed neatly, a quiet confidence tucked into his posture. He didn't know what I had planned, not the full extent. Just that today, I needed him to trust me. I knelt beside him before we stepped into view. "Remember that comic you made? The one about the boy who built his own kingdom?" He nodded. "You're that boy. You always were. And today? This whole vineyard? These people? You walk through them like you own the place." His lip twitched, just slightly. "Do we?" I smiled. "Close enough." Guests began to arrive. Naomi floated from group to group like a campaigner, all air kisses and overloud laughs. Gavin was shaking hands like he was closing a deal. The twins were running through the vineyard with their white satin sashes dragging behind them. Caleb and I took our seats without fanfare. We were placed in the third row, barely an upgrade from our original table 12 dinner position. Naomi noticed us, gave a tight-lipped smile, then turned away. My mother approached a few minutes later, her heels clacking against the stone pathway. "I hope you're not planning to make a scene today, Luke," she whispered. I didn't respond. She adjusted Caleb's boutonniere like she'd earned the right to touch him. "You've always had a flair for the dramatic. Don't ruin your sister's day just because you feel excluded." I looked at her for a long moment. You excluded him. Not me. She scoffed. That's not true. Don't twist things. Caleb turned away, pretending not to hear. But he did. I knew he did. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Placed it into her manicured hand. What is this? She asked, confused. Just read it after the ceremony. It was a printed copy of the blog post. The one Naomi had shared. The one she'd called adorable. Except this one had a small caption at the top, written by Yell Rowan, aka Luke T. My mother frowned but said nothing. The ceremony started. Jenna looked beautiful, radiant, even. Her dress was modest but elegant, her smile real. Tom cried when she walked down the aisle. That part, I'll admit, made me emotional. She deserved this. She deserved happiness. The twins performed their roles with the practiced clumsiness of kids who'd been bribed with cake. Naomi dabbed her eyes like she was watching The Notebook. I waited. My moment came just after the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. They kissed. Applause. Then my cue. The DJ switched to reception music. Guests began to shuffle toward the tables for the dinner portion. I walked toward the sound booth, tapped my AV guy on the shoulder, and whispered, "Mic 2." He nodded. I stepped onto the low stage near the head table and picked up the handheld mic. "Excuse me," I said, projecting calmly. "Sorry to interrupt. I know I'm not officially part of the schedule, but I was asked to help with the audio today, and I just want to say a quick word to the couple." Heads turned. Naomi stiffened. My mother stared at me, unreadable. Jenna looked surprised, but not upset. I began slowly. "Jenna, I'm proud of you. You've grown into someone strong, kind, and full of grace, even when the people around you didn't always make it easy. And Tom, you're a lucky man, but also a good one. I see that." A murmur of polite agreement. Then I continued. "There's something I've never said out loud. Not to this whole family, anyway. But since we're all here, it feels like the right time." I let that hang. People shifted uncomfortably. Naomi whispered something to Gavin. "I have a son," I said. "His name is Caleb. He's 10. He's brilliant, creative, and stronger than any child should have to be. And for the past several years, I've watched him be overlooked. Not just by strangers, but by this family." Silence now. Not a breath. Some of you have said things to him, or about him, that you thought he didn't hear. But he did. He always did. And while I could stand here and recount every insult, every snub, every joke at his expense, I won't. Because I've learned that the best revenge isn't about humiliation. It's about recognition. I glanced at Caleb. He's the one who inspired CloudKeep, that art platform for kids that's been featured on 3 national blogs. That's his story. That's his kingdom. And you've all been so busy pretending he didn't belong, you didn't even notice you were sharing Naomi's story about him, praising him, liking it, spreading it. People began checking their phones. Realization dawning like a slow storm. And here's the thing, I added. I didn't say any of this to shame you. I said it because it's the last time I ever will. Naomi stood. "This isn't the time or the place." "It's exactly the time," I said, without raising my voice. "Because from now on, Caleb and I won't be the afterthoughts. We won't be the ones you reach out to when you need a second plate filled or a back row occupied." I looked at Jenna, who was tearing up. "This is your day, and I'll remember it as the day my son stood beside me, not behind me. And that's what matters." I handed the mic back. Walked off stage. Naomi's mouth was open like she wanted to scream, but couldn't find a word. Gavin looked pale. My mother sat frozen, the printout still in her hand. And Caleb? He stood, walked calmly to my side, took my hand, and together, we left. The fallout was immediate. Naomi tried to spin it. She posted a long-winded caption a few days later about families having differences, but still loving each other. Comments were limited. Gavin said nothing. My mother emailed me a week later saying she wished I'd handled things privately. "But Jenna?" She called me. "You were right," she said. "I should have fought harder. For Caleb. For you. I'm sorry. That was enough." A month later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Ridgeview's board. Apparently, Naomi had filed a complaint trying to get me barred from future events as a disruptive guest. The board reviewed the footage and revoked her hosting privileges instead. Turns out, minority ownership does have its perks. She won't be hosting another wine-tasting baby shower there anytime soon. Caleb kept drawing. And this time, his stories were different. The kingdoms were brighter. The villains were defeated. And the boy? The boys stood tall. They never saw us coming, but we've always been here.